The Roman Catholic Church in the Democratic Republic of Congo mediates last-ditch talks to resolve political tensions over delayed elections. The UN Secretary-General criticizes the UN mission in South Sudan, the US and others for not taking action during the July outbreak of violence in Juba. And US President Barack Obama warns that America will take action against Russia or any other foreign government that interferes in US elections. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We'll have more on those stories shortly, but first, French police say they are considering the possibility that arsonists ignited a fire that swept through a center for migrant workers early Friday in the Boulogne-Billancourt township just west of Paris. The blaze killed one person and injured several others. Authorities say the fire broke out in the reception hall of the six-story building that houses around 300 people. Firefighters say they rescued 6 people. 16 people were injured, 3 of them seriously, when they jumped from the building to escape the fumes. Police say traces of flammable material had been found at the scene and criminal action has not been ruled out. Well, since early 2015, France and other European Union countries have struggled to come to grips with a record influx of migrants fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa, the Middle East and Asia. Meanwhile, violence against asylum seekers has increased. Joining us now live via Skype from Paris is journalist Catherine Field. Good evening, Catherine.
Good evening.
Please tell us a little more about this fire in Paris today.
The fire broke out around 4 a.m. local time. That was when police and firefighters were called to this migrant workers hostel to the west of Paris. There they found that the fire was quite localized, but many of the residents had got very panicked. And one in particular, a man aged in his 40s from Mali, he jumped from the third floor window and in fact he died of his wounds there. There are at least 14 other residents who fled, either jumping out of the windows or out the back. They also sustained injuries. They are being treated in hospital. I spoke to the police just a couple of hours ago. They said they're not ruling anything in. They're not ruling anything out. They say that they're looking at the possibility that this was an arson attack on migrants. They're also looking at whether or not it was actually a sort of a settling of scores between residents in that complex. But you have to remember there's been problems at this particular centre before. There was an attack there around 18 months ago. So police are well aware that people know of this particular hostel and they know that it's been targeted before.
Now, Catherine, there have been all these reports of people being hostile towards refugees or asylum seekers. Have there been any serious attacks on migrants in any other part of France?
Indeed, there have been. In October, there was an attack on a migrant hostel in the south of France. Bullets were fired into the building itself. The windows were damaged. There's also been attacks on other, if you like, these reception centres for migrants in the west of France. So we've seen quite a few of these types of attacks. It's concerning for the authorities because authorities are already stretched here. In France, you have to remember there's still a state of emergency here. So police and all the other security officials are absolutely stretched. So they say that whilst they are aware that in particular migrants may well be targeted, there's just only so many places each of them can be at any given time.
Now, is there a sense of fear among the migrants when you speak to them, especially concern over their treatment by the French?
There is indeed. Just 24 hours ago, I was at an encampment in the north of Paris and speaking to some young Afghanis there. They said that they'd actually gone to the reception centre sent up by the mayor of Paris and asked that they be given a bed there, to be given shelter, and they were turned away. So they were saying, well, we've done the right thing, we've come here, we've gone to the authorities, we've asked for help, and they've just turned us away. So there's a sort of a feeling that if you weren't in that group of migrants, perhaps at the end of October, early November, who were moved to these reception centres, then really you're not going to be treated as well. And the chances are that you'll be moved on, possibly back over the border to Italy fairly quickly.
Okay. Well, Catherine, we do appreciate your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's journalist Catherine Field reporting live via Skype from Paris. Now, the Roman Catholic Church is mediating last-ditch talks in the Democratic Republic of Congo, trying to resolve political tensions over delayed elections. President Joseph Kabila's election mandate ends on Monday, but most of the opposition has rejected any plans for Kabila to remain in office until polls are held in 2018. Emily Eob reports on the influential role the Catholic Church is playing in the DRC's turbulent politics.
The talks are still underway in Kinshasa, but the Catholic Church, known locally as the National Episcopal Conference of Congo, or SENCO, achieved a breakthrough just by bringing all the political players into the same room. Tensions have been running high over the delay of presidential elections and the plan for President Joseph Kabila to remain in power after his mandate ends on December 19th. Most of the opposition boycotted the previous talks in September, saying, among other things, that the mediators was biased in favor of the government. This time, with the clock ticking and the international pressure increasing, the opposition agreed to take part in what they deem a more balanced mediation.
The Church has proven its capacities. At various critical times in this country, the Catholic Church has stepped in.
In the early 1990s, it was a clergyman who led the National Conference aimed at democratizing the DRC following years of dictatorship under Mobutu Sese Seko. In the most recent presidential elections in 2011, won by Kabila, SENCO contested the results, citing irregularities. This prompted some to assert that the church was siding with the opposition. Critics repeated the allegation when the church walked out on the talks in September, soon after the main opposition bloc. But SENCO's Secretary General, Father Donatien Cholet, denies any bias.
The only solution to the current crisis can be found in inclusive dialogue. Bishops are convinced that development and peace are tied with democracy. That's why they get involved in helping the Congolese people to strengthen democracy.
Democracy and respect of the Constitution are among the topics most discussed by the Congolese, who traditionally gather each day in their neighborhoods to learn and comment on the latest political news.
The church is in the middle of the village. When there are talks, when there is dispute between politicians, the church is there to lessen the tension. So we support the Catholic Church. But if the outcome of the talks is not positive, on the 19th, it won't matter anymore.
The closed-door talks are expected to end Thursday evening. Emily Eob for VOA News in Kinshasa.
Global food security monitors say that Nigeria's border state is at an increased risk of famine, with one study projecting the number of those affected will rise to 115,000 in 2017, up from 55,000 this year. The northeastern state is the area worst hit by the violence of Boko Haram's 7-year insurgency. Now, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, which is backed by the UN and other aid agencies, has issued a special alert calling for urgent humanitarian action. It says that people displaced by conflict are affected the most. Low crop production, disrupted livelihoods, and financial crisis are also to blame. The United Nations says 75,000 children could starve to death over the next few months if they do not receive humanitarian assistance. Well, the United Nations mission in South Sudan is being criticized by the UN Secretary General, the United States, and others for not taking action during the outbreak of violence in Juba in July. VOA's Jill Craig recently accompanied an Ethiopian detachment of UNMISS during a patrol in Juba to protect civilians.
It's another hot day here in Juba, and an Ethiopian battalion has just begun its afternoon patrol of a UN Protection of Civilians, or POC camp, housing about 39,000 internally displaced people, or IDPs.
After July crisis, the accomplishment of the patrol is increased from day to day. So there is no interruption, night and day. There is no interruption.
Increased patrols are among the new procedures put in place after an investigation found that UN personnel failed to protect civilians and aid workers during the July violence in Juba. More than an estimated 300 people were killed. Rapes, looting, and other attacks also took place. An unmissed spokeswoman says more watchtowers have been installed, and a weapons-free zone has been created on the periphery. Patrols now escort women to collect firewood in response to concerns about an increase in sexual violence against civilians around the POC site, despite the presence of peacekeepers.
These days, I am able to go outside. But in those days, when there was conflict here, I was unable to go outside.
But another IDP argues that life is still quite grim.
For example, we don't have enough water, we don't have enough food, security is not very okay, and life is actually very terrible. Kids don't go to school, elderly people are dying because there's no good medical services.
The government argues that the United Nations has overstepped its mandate by establishing POC sites for what it calls fundraising purposes.
And if there are people who are living on these people, if you remove them, then you have deprived them of their livelihood. This is how I understand it. This is not correct. We want all these people to be taken to their home areas. If they are unable to provide the protection, will they assemble all the people of South Sudan in the POC so that they protect them?
The United Nations says the protection of civilian sites were never intended to become permanent. It also says its force is limited by freedom of movement challenges around the country. There are 6 POC sites in South Sudan, hosting about 224,000 IDPs. The unmissed force is comprised of about 12,000 peacekeeping troops and police and is still waiting on the deployment of an additional 4,000. Jill Craig, VOA News, Juba.
A new eruption of fighting in Syria has caused the evacuation of people from Aleppo to be suspended, leaving thousands of people trapped. Blasts were heard Friday near convoys moving people out of the city. According to state media, rebel forces have violated the ceasefire agreement with the government, but rebels say that is not true. Addressing a UN news briefing in Geneva by telephone, World Health Organization representative Elizabeth Hoff says Red Cross and UN officials were told to leave the area.
The worrying part for us at the moment is that there are still in the besieged enclaves of East Aleppo, the remaining besieged enclave where we have had the evacuations going on, there are still high numbers of women and infants, children under 5 that need to get out. They have been collecting themselves on the point where the buses and the ambulances were waiting for them. But now with the operation aborted, they will have to go back to their houses. And this is a great concern to us because we know that they are desperate to get out.
Well, convoys of ambulances and buses pulled away Thursday from eastern Aleppo and went into government-held territory before eventually making it to another rebel-held part of the province. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country is working with Turkey to start a new round of peace talks on Syria with the goal of nationwide ceasefire. Well, viewers, Zlatitsa Hoke has more on the situation in Aleppo.
Video footage from eastern Aleppo shows ambulances and buses arriving in a neighborhood captured by the government, where hundreds of people waited to be transported to another rebel-held area. More than 30,000 people are expected to leave in the coming days. The United Nations humanitarian advisor for Syria, Jan Egeland, said the sick, the wounded and children were the first to be evacuated. He bemoaned a lack of international effort to prevent the killing and destruction in Aleppo and other besieged parts of Syria.
700,000 people in 15 besieged areas beyond East Aleppo, and they are a symbol of this lack of presence, lack of protection. All of the parties on the ground are guilty of blocking access for international humanitarian workers.
The United States and others have condemned Russia for aiding the massacre of civilians by the Syrian army. Moscow got involved in the Syrian conflict under the pretext that it would fight Islamic State, but has in fact provided military support to Damascus.
We are fighting ISIL as we said we would and we're going to do and we need to do. and they are participating in the Syrian civil war in a brutal and unhelpful way, rather than doing what they were supposed to do.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad hailed the capture of eastern Aleppo, calling it history in the making. An estimated 1,000 people were killed during the siege of rebel-held Aleppo, including women and children.
The Syrian army liquidated over 900 terrorists, destroyed dozens of military equipment units.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry asked for safe passage for fighters as well as civilians who wish to leave Aleppo, and full access by aid workers to people in other besieged Syrian areas.
And with these steps, we are convinced that the killing and the suffering in Syria could stop. And it could stop very, very quickly if Russia and the regime made the decision to do so.
U.S. officials say the government recapture of Aleppo does not signify the end of Syria's civil war, but only makes it harder to organize new peace talks for that country. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out all headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, President Barack Obama warns the U.S. will take action against Russia or any other foreign government trying to meddle in U.S. elections. Stay with us.
From science and technology, here's What's New.
What's new? How about instant replay for referees in the world's most popular sport, football? Remember Maradona's so-called Hand of God goal in 1986 against England? Or Thierry Henry's handball goal in 2009 against Ireland?
Oh, it's in the net. It's a goal.
Well, if you're a World Cup football fan, you remember. Now FIFA will test an instant replay system during football matches. It's called VARs, for Video Assistant Referees, and it involves 23 different cameras feeding video to monitors on the sidelines, so referees can trot on over, take a look, and make the best possible call. FIFA's Massimo Busacca says only major incidents will be reviewed.
And everybody knows what is a clear mistake. So centimeters inside, outside, a clear penalty missed, a clear handball.
FIFA tends to use the VAR system for the 2018 World Cup. A little late for Ireland or England, but better late than never. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grosshans.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has nominated bankruptcy lawyer David Friedman to become the country's next ambassador to Israel. Friedman opposes a key tenet of U.S. policy in the region, the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He made the point at a Trump campaign appearance in October.
The Trump administration will never pressure Israel into a two-state solution or any other solution that is against the wishes of the Israeli people.
Well, he has also compared liberal Jews in America to Jews who helped the Nazis during World War II. In a statement acknowledging his nomination, Friedman said he is looking forward to doing his job from the U.S. Embassy in Israel's eternal capital, Jerusalem. However, the current U.S. embassy is in Tel Aviv. Jerusalem is claimed by both Israel and Palestinians as their capital, and its status has long been a part of peace negotiations. Friedman was an advisor to Trump during the campaign when Trump said he would move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a measure that is sure to raise international objections, especially in the Arab world. Friedman is also a proponent of annexing the West Bank, something most of the international community considers illegal. U.S. President Barack Obama says the United States will take action against Russia or any other foreign government that tries to meddle in U.S. elections. The president says Russia's apparent actions demand U.S. reaction.
I think there is no doubt that when any foreign government tries to impact the integrity of our elections, that we need to take action, and we will, at a time and place of our own choosing. Some of it may be explicit and publicized, some of it may not be. But Mr. Putin is well aware of my feelings about this because I spoke to him directly about it.
Well, the CIA has concluded that Russian hackers broke into the Democratic Party computers to leak potentially embarrassing emails about the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign with the apparent aim of helping Republican Donald Trump win last month's election. Top White House officials say such a thing could not have happened without Russian President Vladimir Putin's involvement or direct knowledge. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called the allegation stupidity and laughable nonsense. Obama told NPR there is still a whole range of assessments going on among U.S. intelligence agencies, and is waiting for a final report on exactly who was involved and why they did it. Well, in today's business news, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is nearing 20,000 as it is on track for 6 straight weeks of gains. With more on the major indexes in the U.S. is Africa 54's business correspondent Jill Malandrino in New York.
Good afternoon from the NASDAQ. Stocks opened higher on this final day of trading this week. We can see all the major averages are up just about a fraction of a percent. We expect volumes to be higher than normal today. This is due to what's called options expiration. As the Dow Industrials, we remain on track for its 6th straight weekly win. We're up about 0.5% for the week coming into today. Now, the blue chip benchmark on Thursday, it traded less than 50 points from the key 20,000 level at one point as bank stocks continue to move higher. Stocks resumed their post-election rally yesterday after a one-day pullback. This is despite continued strength in the dollar to levels we have not seen since early 2003. That's why you're seeing that downtick in gold. Financials led yesterday's gains as bond yields jumped to more than 2-year highs, while tech likely is to become a top mover today. We had some good earnings results out of Adobe, JBL Circuits, and Oracle overnight. Now, both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite, they closed higher on Thursday as well, rebounding from Wednesday's losses and are on track for small gains for the week, too. The declines Wednesday, that came after the Federal Reserve lifted interest rates and signaled 3 hikes could come in 2017. But it seems as if the Trump bump rally still has some seam to go, and fund managers are chasing performance. So it looks as if we're going to end up green on the week as it stands now. From the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, New York, I'm Jill Malandrino, and this is Africa 54.
Well, thanks a lot, Jill. Well, it's time for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, creators of the popular card game Tattoo in Uganda make their mark on the global tech scene. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Somalia, a suicide bomber detonated his explosive-laden vehicle in Mogadishu on Thursday, killing the bomber and injuring several others. In Liberia, Mount Coffee hydropower plant is switched on for the first time in 26 years. Addis Photo Fest opens in the Ethiopian capital. It was founded to bring Black American and African photographers together. In Burkina Faso, scientists are testing a special soap to repel mosquitoes and protect people from malaria, a disease that claimed nearly 500,000 lives in 2015, most of them in Africa. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Now, video gaming is undeveloped in Africa. And although various startup companies have appeared across the continent, there are few success stories. However, in Uganda, Kola Studios might be a game changer. The creators of the popular card game Matatu are making their mark on the global tech scene. VOA's Pondio has the story.
The introduction of broadband internet has spawned a generation of young ICT-savvy people in Africa. Gaming is among the fastest growing industries on the continent. Here in the Ugandan capital Kampala, young techies have developed a cutting-edge mobile app called Matatu. At over 100,000 downloads, the card game has been played more than 6 million times. With the success of this gaming app, Jesper Onono, the brain behind all Android apps at Kola Studios, has joined the growing ranks of East Africa's whiz kids, helping to propel the region into the tech spotlight.
Matatu is a very popular two-card playing game in Uganda. It's actually the most popular game in Uganda right now. So the idea came up back in campus when we were attending a conference, and a thought just hit us that why don't people have this game in their phones?
Matatu, a traditional two-player card game, has long been popular in Uganda. But with the rapid growth of the smartphone market in Kenya, for example, 1 in 5 people accesses the web through their phones. Sharon Rakatungu says that the goal of the game is to play all your cards before your opponent.
We have over 100,000. It's about, the last I checked, it was about 130 something. We get an increase every month. We get about 4,000 or more. We get some peaks. There are some months when we push for advertising, of course we get more than 4,000 a month, but with no advertising, no anything, we get 4,000 a month.
In 2011, Matatu was a finalist in Google's Android Developer Challenge for Sub-Saharan Africa, providing them with the publicity and mentoring, as well as having their apps hosted in a Google Play Store and Google Cloud. Uganda has experienced a dramatic tech hub boom spurred on by collaborative workspaces such as Outbox, Innovation Village, and growing international investment where investors are looking to break into these lucrative markets. Rachel Gichingi is the business development manager at Kola Studios.
We can have a place whereby somebody can say when they're listing in the top 5 apps on their phone, we'll have at least 1 or 2 Kenyan or African apps on it. I feel like that will go a long way in encouraging other young people to begin to believe that there is more potential than what they see. We're not just consumers of content, but we're creators of it.
If the future of computing lies in mobile, and the fastest growth in mobile comes from the developing world, many are beginning to look out to African startups for a taste of things to come. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, a multinational professional services network based in London, Africa's gaming industry has long been on a significant upswing in the past few years, driven primarily by advances in mobile phone technology. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night. A great weekend.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
This word is about the Ebola virus. Listen for it twice.
Quarantine. Nurse Casey Hickox was forced into a mandatory quarantine in a cold tent outside a New Jersey hospital after returning to the U.S. from Sierra Leone. Hickox did not have a fever or other symptoms of Ebola. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie ordered the quarantine and defended his move.
Quarantine means to keep someone away from others to prevent a disease from spreading.
Quarantined people are kept separated, and special measures are taken to prevent the disease from spreading. Now, the next time you hear quarantine,
you will know what this news word means.